All right, everybody, we are going to get started. We are thrilled to welcome Brendan. He has been very busy on the webinar circuit, I think,
Yeah.
COVID. But we are going to ask everybody to just mute your mics, and we're going to do questions at the very end. And Brendan, I will turn it over to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you everybody behind the scenes making VEX possible. I know that you're a volunteer-driven organization, so it's just amazing to see what happens when the community comes together to share ideas, share best practices, and be there to support one another. I was completely blown away by the conference last year in Philadelphia, and so I'm excited to be here virtually. I know I'm not going to get a Philly cheesesteak, but I know everybody's great questions and comments and energy will more than make up for that. So without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get rocking and rolling on today's webinar conversation. Before I jump on in, can someone on the VEX team just confirm that you can see my presentation screen? Excellent, excellent.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Awesome, awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. My name is Brendan Ciecko, and I'm the founder and CEO of Cuseum, a team based in Boston that helps museums and cultural organizations with visitor, member, and donor engagement. I want to talk a little bit today about the various ways that coronavirus has become this unexpected driver, this unexpected accelerator of all forms of innovation in the museum and cultural sector, especially on the digital side, but very much changing and shifting the ways that our organizations operate and how decisions are made, and ultimately how we serve our audiences. So a couple of the topics today, we'll go through some of the questions that were posed by the pandemic, some trends that we've been seeing in the cultural sector, some new technology, some new tools, and how the visitor journey has evolved, the digital visitor experience, and how that's all been evolving over the last couple of months, and then just overall innovation in the visitor experience. So I know we're going to touch on a lot of topics, and very much looking forward to diving deeper and engaging in a conversation with everybody during the Q&A. So feel free to throw some questions in along the way. So right off the bat, kind of putting myself in the shoes of mid-February, mid to late February, myself as someone who's very interested in how the cultural sector is evolving and changing, and how macro and micro events are impacting the way that we do things and impacting the way that we think about things. I had been watching the pandemic unfold in Asia and make its way to Europe and beyond. And so in mid-February, my team and I started doing a little bit of research about the ways in which organizations, museums primarily in China and the Asian market, were responding to this moment, responding to the ways in which they operate and engage their audiences while their doors are closed, thinking that just like everybody, this was going to be a flash in the pan. It was going to be over and done with, nothing to worry about. And then a week later, museums in Europe started to close. So that's when you started significant cultural attractions start to close their doors. And right around that time, we're like, we need to put up some information. We need to put out what we're seeing and what we think is about to ensue. And then right within days of us putting out this blog article about how museums and attractions are preparing and responding, within days of that is when the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the museums of Boston and a lot of the museums on the East Coast started to announce that they would be closed for the week. And I think, like everybody, we thought that this was going to be a week or two. We'd get some sanitation stations in place and we'd be back to normal, not realizing, the reality that we've come to know very, very closely over the last couple of months. And from that point on, we just saw the importance of putting out information, doing the research, putting out putting out information, putting out resources, and trying to support the cultural and museum sector to the best of our abilities. So you can find a couple resources on American Alliance of Museums, articles and blogs that we've published and contributed to on the topics of revenue generation and digital content and channels. But anyways, where it really started to come clear just how important these dialogues were was, within a couple of days of putting out that blog post in late February, early March, it became one of the most read and circulated articles. And we're like, we should host a little dialogue. And so we started this webinar series and had facilitated conversations with over 500 different voices, thousands of research hours. And it all started with this first webinar on March 18th with Seema Rayo, the Deputy Director and Chief Experience Officer over at the Akron Art Museum. I know she's also keynote speaker tomorrow. She's incredible, and I can't wait to hear the wisdom that she shares with us all tomorrow. And Scott Stolen, the Director and President at the Philbrook Museum of Art. So literally within a couple of days, we're like, let's try to bring together some voices that we really that we've always looked up to and idolized, and just kind of have a conversation about how to keep your audiences engaged, entertained, and inspired during this, new unprecedented moment in time. Little did we know 4,400 people would register for this conversation. And it was the first of many to come. And when I say it was the first of many to come, I mean, we've hosted, I don't know, I want to say 30 or 40 conversations, all kind of going back to the idea of how we're functioning, how we're making decisions, how we're launching content, how we're welcoming people back, how we're managing interns, and how we're supporting educational program, all with coronavirus being the anchor component of that. So I think something like 80,000 views and registrations for this programming. It's all, in many ways, thanks to the great voices in the museum and cultural community that were willing to share an hour and dive into some conversations and answer some really challenging questions. So yeah, 70,000 and actually 80,000 since last time we checked in terms of those webinars. And we're really just kind of looking at a lot of these questions. How is COVID-19 changing the way that visitors and members and donors engage at museums and attractions? So we try to make sure that we are covering the different perspectives, not just marketing departments and social media, not just membership and development, not just visitor engagement, but making sure that we are kind of moving around the different topics departmentally and cross-departmentally to make sure that we're uncovering and unearthing and sharing and exploring topics across all of those different nodes and areas. And then from the very beginning onward, and I know this is just an ongoing iterative process for most of us, how are our organizations preparing for an era of social distancing? How long does that era last? These are just some of the questions that people are asking. How are museums and attractions ensuring the safety of their visitors and employees? Ongoing conversation with safety being first, and then thinking through and rethinking through the visitor journey, kind of bringing things back to kind of square one, and rethinking what components are necessary, what are not, what we can have today, what we can think about tomorrow. These are all of the types of things that we're constantly in conversation with our peers, our colleagues, and the field at large, to understand and put pen to paper and I guess voice to webinar, if you will. So some of the common touch points that became very clear and are probably were in place with most of our museums is that there are a lot of different physical touch points from entry to the completion of your experience that a visitor encountered throughout. So that might be your ticketing kiosk, that might have been your credit card and cash payment terminals, physical tickets and membership cards, shared audio guides, touch screens and interactives, and kind of things in that vein. And so we kind of look at all of these nodes and look for evidence and interest in ways that organizations were thinking about them across all different verticals. So we're starting to see, during the early days, well, what were they doing in this market for theaters? Well, in Korea, they were actually moving towards ticketing kiosks and trying to make that, nationwide across their theater programs. In certain states and government and countries, they were getting rid of cash payments in favor of contactless payments. In Europe, some countries were banning shared audio guides. Like, all of these extreme but necessary actions to make sure that we were mitigating any risk to health, and doing so swiftly and kind of measuring and evaluating as time evolves. And I love kind of tuning into Twitter every now and then and seeing kind of conversations and debates across touchscreens and interactives, especially as they're so kind of core to a lot of science museums and children's museums and other types. So really looking at those items and then thinking about this world where there are no object labels, no wall labels, no guided tours, no touchscreens, no interactives, a lot of no's, a lot of things that previously we as a sector depended on being kind of put on the back burner due to the possibility of risk of spread and infection. So really, I think in the biggest way we have ever seen in our lifetimes, a lot of rapid changes and rapid restrictions taking place. So some of the risks and challenges very clearly were the spread of risk due to encounters with physical equipment and devices. I think that is so obvious. Close proximity with visitors, very obvious, but a challenge for smaller organizations and even larger organizations. I think one of those untangible items that's hard to measure, anxiety. What is the anxiety around guest management, from the internal front of house and behind the scenes staff that are trying to make sure that people are moving their way through? And there wasn't really a playbook in the early days, and I think we're still actively writing the playbook as we progress. And then again, another big serious item is the financial and legal liability due to the risks to employees. So I know organizations all have different philosophies on all of these topics, but the safety of employees and visitors is really important. And then the long tail implications around any missteps or being a little bit too open to risk is any potential decline in attendance or revenue due to lack of preparedness. So I think it was one of the big moments in time where everybody was racing to get things as prepared as possible in a world where there hasn't really, other than disaster preparedness and other types of protocols that were in place, a very new type of world where organizations were kind of reaching out broadly to see, well, what are you doing? How are you preparing? Both to make sure that they could reopen successfully in various phases, but also to mitigate against some of those long-term. And some of the predictions many months ago that we started to put out is that physical touch points are going to be phased out in favor of different bring your own device solutions, contactless solutions, things that put the power in the hand of the consumer, but also give them the comfort and safety and security of using their own devices rather than shared devices. The rise of contactless experiences, payments, and technology, I think, has been very clear, not only obviously within museums, but very broadly. You find yourself in different types of retail or consumer environments, and it's very clear that the rise of contactless is here and it's here to stay. And then kind of pulling things back to just the bases, service design that has been completely rethought, that is encouraging and enforcing social distancing through signage, through training, through onboarding, through all different things. And we've even seen a couple instances, not as broadly spread in the United States, but there are instances of museums that are using these contact tracing, social distance buzzers, if you will. So a lot of new technologies and a lot of new philosophies on the types of solutions that can help that. So kind of looking at things in 3 phases around the visitor journey. And I know every organization has different types of visitor journeys, more complex than others, some incorporating the different visitor personas, but kind of distilling them down to one thing that has become so abundantly clear. I remember hearing from my team that we, across a couple of webinars, over 250 people were asking about timed ticketing. And so it became very clear that time ticketing was here, here to stay and here to arrive in a really big way. And so I know, even from a personal perspective, when I've gone to museums over the last couple of weeks and months, that time ticketing is always a part of that equation. And I think for many organizations, whether you've found something that works within your existing CRM or point of sale system, there are all of these new types of solutions that are coming into play that are lightweight, easy to use, and allow that pre-visit experience to be very clear, very guided, and time ticketing is playing a really big part in that. One second. And one thing that's just interesting to point out around the changing in the way that organizations are operating, there's a great report that came out from McKinsey recently that pointed to the overwhelming majority, 9 out of 10 executives believing that COVID-19 will change the way businesses operate and how business is done over the next 5 years. And I think for museums, it's going to be probably the next 5 to 10 years where the long tail impacts of what we've experienced will have very clear influence on the way that organizations are thinking about visitor experience, digital engagement, finance, labor, and kind of all things in between. And now thinking about the on-site experience, again, contactless entry and registration is very front and center. We haven't seen as much as one would predict, but there's been a lot of talk about voice and gesture activated kiosks, just alternative ways to interact with content that don't require physical touch points, whether that be to buy a ticket or to activate some content. Virtual queuing systems, seeing those at a lot of larger organizations and mid-sized organizations that have time ticketing, but there's, again, more tools coming onto the horizon that are affordable and lightweight for organizations really of every shape and sizes. AR wayfinding, we have some predictions around the role that more linear wayfinding will play in enforcing and reinforcing social distancing and also crowd control, and then just mobile enabled content and engagement. I think we've all seen just how important our mobile devices have been over the last couple of months, whether we are picking up takeout or any such thing, whether it be to scan the QR code that gets you in your mobile ticket, or facilitating commerce and other such things. So, all of those things have changed the on-site experience in really big ways. And then just even on that notion of contactless payments, following a lot of research coming out where MasterCard has said 8 in 10 consumers are now using contactless payments. And so, we're seeing great, adoption or great kind of leaps and bound jump in consumer behavior around the types of tools that they're using, the confidence in the types of tools that they're using, and even individuals that were maybe less tech savvy or of demographics that are less tech savvy, finding themselves more comfortable with ordering groceries, contactless payment, things that they historically would have done, hand to hand, cash to cash. So I think it's changed consumer behavior in significant ways. And just even if you look at here, after the pandemic is over and done, vaccine is available, yada, yada, yada. Even 75% of consumers say that they'll continue to use contactless technology. So I think it's a testament to just consumer expectations being clearly changed by not only the realities, the necessities, but people saying, this is more convenient, it's easier to use, why don't we just continue down this path indefinitely? I know there's a lot of research that reinforces that. And then post-visit, you now have increased capacity to engage with visitors digitally before and after they visit on site. And some of the examples around that, other than your post follow-up and your surveys and social media, is the value, which both affects post-visit and pre-visit, of peer review sites like TripAdvisor and Yelp and Google and Facebook, and making sure that the sentiment is positive, that people felt safe, they felt guided, and that they trusted the institution to ensure that their visit again was safe and satisfactory. So I think a lot of different tools that maybe were on the back burner, a lot of different avenues and channels that were historically on the back burner for most organizations, have really reshift their positions over the last months. And then digital visitor experience, and I know that this is evolving by the day, is we've seen, probably just like everybody here, the surge in virtual events and experience. And I know that in the first couple of weeks and months, it was, how long is this thing going to last? How much do we need to really allocate and invest not only in our social media, but long-term sustainable virtual events and experiences? And not only seeing that in the terms of annual galas, classroom, K through 12, any type of event imaginable has now made its way into the virtual, virtual side of it, and seeing some organizations use that as a new opportunity to drive revenue, which we've researched and written about and covered on our webinars. But one thing, just as like a sidebar, that I'm very curious about, and I'd love to hear other thoughts on this, is that Amazon recently, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, rolled out a new marketplace called Amazon Explore, where they want to help kind of shepherd in the next generation of virtual events to help content creators and so on generate revenue. And I do wonder the place that has within the museum and cultural sector, not only as a revenue generator, but also just getting to the people, getting to the visitors where they are. And we all know Amazon's visibility and distribution channel is second to none there. Other than that, starting to see a lot of virtual membership levels that don't necessarily take into consideration the physical experience at the museum, but the virtual experience. So seeing some organizations roll out completely new membership tiers that are greatly discounted and paid for, I think, on a monthly recurring basis, that allow people to tap into virtual visits and virtual content. And just thinking about that as even being a new element of the visitor experience and of the constituent journey that didn't exist a year ago. Opportunities to engage on social media, I think, was the first and foremost thing that sent kind of shockwaves throughout the cultural sector as being a prime time to captivate an audience. There's handfuls of examples and handfuls of headlines around the role museum social media played as being a little bit of an area for respite and for relaxation and for kind of helping weave your way through the anxiety and the stresses of the world around you, started to really give certain museums, maybe more so the zoos and aquariums, an opportunity to be there for their communities in a way that probably wasn't the case from the beginning of the year in reverse. So lastly, the donation experience, that's obviously changing, where now you can't necessarily engage in a cash donation or even become a member in cash or become a member by going in line. All of those historical funnels, if you will, have shifted to a more digital basis. And now your donation for that great experience someone might have been that virtual experience they had. So really changing the way that organizations, institutions, and their consumers are thinking about their philanthropic or altruistic involvement with the organization has certainly evolved. And so I think in a lot of ways it comes down to there's greatest surface area, if you will, for these digital touch points, digital phases, digital kind of markers within the journey or throughout the journey that can make or break the museum experience. And so it's become a moment to really evaluate those, measure those, and try to understand where it is where you can kind of strengthen those different phases of the funnel, if you will, to ensure that every person, every visitor, whether it be physical or digital, is having a great experience with your organization and with your brand at the end of the day. So some new trends, again, a little bit of this we touched on earlier: streamlined ticketing and admissions. Contactless tools are here to stay, and I think that the macro data on that from the likes of MasterCard and others is very clear about the consumer behavior evolving and people being really latched on to the convenience factor. Accelerated adoption of mobile technology, I think, is very clear. And then the ongoing or new importance of quote unquote digital visitors. So that's something that we think a lot about and have been pulled into a number of conversations around, thinking that the success of your organization, although success in museums is varying in how people define it, your annual reports this year are not only going to have your visitor, your number of physical on-site visitors, but your digital visitors, whether that be website views, as well as social media engagement, and of course your virtual events. And I think that's going to be not only introduced for this year's annual reports, but in perpetuity. I think now is the time that directors and people up and down the ladder and across the field have acknowledged the importance of digital and the importance of technology in really profound ways. So that before we kind of conclude the presentation for today and make our way into the questions, the Q&A and conversation that I'd love to have with everyone. One note that really stands out to me that has been in the back of my mind since the moment it was published is Twilio reported that COVID-19 has accelerated digital engagement strategy and digital transformation across the entire spectrum by 6 years. So you kind of think about the unbelievable impact that this single moment in time has had on the way that we think, the way that we consume, the way that we interact, the way that we socialize, but the way that we conduct ourselves in the digital arena. I think there's so much to be said about that. And just thinking about, if you look back to where your organization was 6 years ago to today and 6 years into the future, I think the concept of time and the significance of this moment in time as a forcing function is just really, really profound and colossal. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share a couple ideas and share a couple of questions with you today. Thank you everybody who's tuned in for this conversation, and I would love to answer any questions, love to hear what your organizations are doing, what you're thinking about, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brendan. So you are welcome to type questions into the chat, or you're welcome to also unmute yourselves and ask the questions directly. I know you have questions.
I would love to see the data, the study that says about 6 years, because that's oddly specific. I would like to know the methodology of that study.
Yeah, I'd be happy to be happy to post that and send that to you. It's interesting when you not only have one study, but kind of an array of studies that you can triangulate between that are proposing the amount of years that the business world has leaped forward. And a lot of them, or most of them, are pointing to a 5 to 10 year period. So happy to post that study. Let me see if I can, I can probably pull that up right now. But yeah, you're right. I mean, some things are qualitative, some things are quantitative, some things involve the opinions of those polled, which are commonly going to be, executives at the, at the global 2000 level, at the certain segments. But yeah, happy to find that, and happy to post that right up here. Great question. And now it is posted. So I just posted that in the channel.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And yeah, a lot of those studies are done by like Gardner, Forrester, McKinsey. These are the types of research consulting firms that kind of have their fingers on the pulse of what big trends are taking place across all sectors. So we keep a close eye on those, and then try to find where the museum, kind of fits into that equation. I know there's nonprofit, and then, very specifically, the needs and the realities of arts and culture are quite different than that.
Okay, so we do have another question. How do you think museums can utilize their apps to connect with visitors digitally while visiting during COVID?
Great. Well, that's a great question. Beyond the content delivery component, other ways that we have seen organizations leverage mobile technology or an app, for instance, is kind of having a welcome onboarding component where it's very clear the moment you step on site, what resources are available for you, what protocol to follow, how to make the most of your experience. And so that's something that I've seen. And we've also been seeing things like location-based messaging, push notifications, things that are a little bit more contextual, so that visitors have everything they need when they need it. Kind of on a more, I guess I want to say, more kind of commerce-oriented basis, there are organizations that are incorporating commerce into their apps, so like purchasing things at the gift shop or the cafe, all through one centralized portal. So those are just, a couple of examples. But I think at the bare basis, you want to make sure protocol is clear and that there is engaging, compelling content to help guide, educate, and kind of inspire the visitor throughout that journey.
Great. So another question from Katie. You said your first webinar reached 4,000 people. How do you think they heard about it? And did you already have that many Cuseum connections?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we've been in the museum and cultural space for the last 6+ years, and have put out what we think is resourceful and compelling content that has people subscribing to the mailing list and things like that. But I think we were all completely blown away. We had never done a webinar before. That was our first webinar, and I also think that Scott and Seema are just trusted voices and have their own reputation and reach over Facebook and Twitter. But we were completely blown away by that. We had to upgrade our Zoom account 4 times because we're like, oh my God, there's 102 people. We have to upgrade to a paid account. Oh my God, there's 600 now. We need a 500-person account. So that was kind of wild to see. And we generally do those, well, during kind of the heat of the moment. We were doing those every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and then we were doing a membership and development focused one every Monday at 1 or 2 o'clock. And as the big topics to cover have kind of cooled down a little, we're all kind of like back to school and things are reopening. If there are any other topics that haven't been covered, is when we spin those up. But we felt like, wow, we covered a lot of territory. Let's kind of slow down and see if there's any big topics for exploration. So I think we'll probably re-explore the revenue generation component. We've done a couple on that, which was fairly new. Like when we first put out the line, only like 3 or 4 organizations were like, yeah, we're doing work in this. We've generated some revenue through like animal cameos and through virtual fundraisers. And now I know we have hundreds of organizations that have confirmed that they're doing work in that area, and some that are saying this is here to stay for us as a sustainable avenue to reach global audiences, or audiences that might still feel uncomfortable coming back physically. But that's a great question, Katie. It's kind of like, I don't know, the luck of the draw, and just how just how much interest there were in that webinar.
I was one that was always on them, so they were
thank you.
very helpful to me. And Caroline also at the very beginning said she's so grateful, and it gave her something to look forward to each week while working from home. So
thank you so much
for adding them.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, Lauren would love to know, are there any specific examples for digital engagement from museums that have stood out to you as particularly creative or effective?
Yeah, so digital engagement for museums. What I'll do here is I will post an article that we penned for AAM, as we were just starting to see like the early examples of creative things that museums were doing beyond the obvious. Like, I think it's very easy to point to Cowboy Tim and examples like that, and those are fantastic. And I think Museum Bouquet and Museum Sunshine and some of the items that I guess you could say went viral, like the Getty Challenge. I would say for most people in the museum space know those examples. So we're always interested in what are the things that haven't yet been written about by the New York Times or CNN, and started to find really interesting things from large museums, small museums that we thought were really creative. So I'll post a couple examples. I know the one that like blew my mind early on was, honestly, and I think the folks that will have known about the zoo are in the Philly area, which I understand the VEX team is. I think it was the Elmwood Park Zoo. I'd never heard of the Elmwood Park Zoo. I think it's near Philly, right?
Yes.
Well, so near Philly. They were the first zoo, one of the first organizations that we, when we put out that line, hey, who's doing things that are generating revenue and a little bit different, they reached out and like, oh yeah, we've been doing these animal cameos. People are doing Zoom cameos where businesses will give us $250 to have like a giraffe, and we do this giraffe-a-thon. And I thought that was so unbelievably creative. And then within weeks, number of zoos were doing things of that nature. And I think they said it was generating tens of thousands of dollars for the organization. So I thought that was not only, hey, the animals are here. We're here because we have to care for the animals anyway. Why don't we do something that will excite and engage our visitors? So I thought that was really creative. I've seen more and more organizations using the psychology and narrative around travel in their outreach and in their programming in a way that you didn't see previously, which I find to be really, really interesting, being that tourism is one of the biggest industries on earth. We're all looking for a little bit of escapism right now. And so started seeing things in that vein. Wow, it's going to seem like I love Pennsylvania, but I was going to say the Carnegie Museums have been doing an interesting job with that, where they refer to their programs as like a day trip to Paris, a day trip to Germany, a day trip to Dublin, a day trip here and there, where they are mixing cooking classes with curatorial talks on their food, or curatorial talks on their art, kind of paired with food and things of that nature. And I've seen that recently from the new museum that had a join us for a cocktail reception from the Parisian apartment of so-and-so. And I'm like, just kind of thinking about that, where you get the rush of dopamine and excitement from reading that, even though it's going to be virtual. So seeing a lot of organizations doing things like that, which I find creative, which are achievable. I don't want to just talk about, oh, this museum in the Netherlands is doing telepresence robot, remote controlled robot tours, because I know most of our organizations will not be able to do that, despite that being creative. So I will share a couple links here, and those are just, I'm rambling a little, but I hope those are some decent examples of what stood out to me.
Very cool. One more question. So from Alexandra. So she says, so many people miss the guided tour experience or the less formal pop-up interpretation in galleries. What are some innovative COVID-friendly solutions that you've come across that really work?
So this is the question from Jennifer Squire?
This is from Alexandra.
Oh, 1 second. I want to see if I can find.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm like
I
listening.
skipped her by accident.
No problem. Okay, so Alexandra Weaver. So many people miss the guided tour experience or less formal pop-up interpretation. What are some innovative COVID-friendly solutions that you've come across that really work? I mean, kind of the jury's still out on that one. Beyond the mobile guide and beyond, you know, some of those aspects that allow you to infinitely scale your staff that would have been there in a safe capacity to do so. I can definitely do a little bit more research on this one beyond, again, the more digital oriented way of going about it, or the printed, you know, guide of going about it. Because I haven't seen anything beyond that has really kind of blown my mind over the last couple of museum trips that I've been on. And I think that the part of that is we're all kind of in a different state of mind when we are going to the museum in general, where we're not expecting anything that you know, that is going to be a one-to-one with the human experience of walking through. So I think just kind of trying to find those moments of delight, those little things that the staff that maybe that check you in with your time ticketing do to make you feel comfortable and confident, you know, really go. I think that's what we're all looking for right now, because I think it is this, I don't want to say a hibernation period or a taking things slow period, but it very much is. So like in my own experiences, I've really appreciated just kind of knowing things are clear, knowing where to go, knowing kind of things with safety front and center. So like when I've just within the last couple of weeks gone to like Mass Mocha or Hancock Shaker Village or Storm King, I'm naming places that are either outside or very, very wide open spaces. I know that just that sense of comfort, security, and everything is, we've thought through everything so that you don't, and that you can feel safe, is I think what most visitors are looking for today, because you know, there's very little that's going to be a one-to-one with you know, what the previous type of experience was.
All right, now we can jump down to Jennifer. So she is asking, with the advancement of 6 years, pushing digital advancement 6 years, is there information that visitors are also updating their personal technology?
Yeah, I mean, so the question here is about, is there information or data that visitors are also updating their personal technology? Absolutely. There are stats that are readily available, easy to get your hands on, about the life cycle or replacement period for personal technology. For mobile phones, it's something like just shy of 2 years. And all of that information is online. I don't know how that has evolved maybe during a COVID moment, but Apple just announced their new iPhone. So soon enough, we will know. And I know in November, the Google Pixel 5 is coming out. So generally and statistically, looking at the last 10 years, it's about every 2 years, looking at the broad masses. I'm sure it changes by region and demographically, but about 2 years is the replacement period for personal technology. And any of the questions where I've referred to any specific data or research, I'm going to send to Nicole, and Nicole can post it, or I'm sure there's some sort of way to get it to you. But I'd be happy to do that.
Great. I think we have one more question, and then our time is actually going to be up anyway, With all the new digital programming, I'm trying to find the best way to track visitor and engagement attendance numbers. Any thoughts or suggestions for analytics and information to where they can look for gathering and tracking this type of information?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're talking about physical, if you're talking about digital, two very different things. I know that for most organizations, their point of sale and their CRM systems are the system of record or lifeblood for understanding that. Time ticketing, not only enabling what it has enabled around crowd control and safety and contact tracing, has also enabled much more focused insights into behavior around when people are coming and going and things like that. So that's going to be the kind of first and foremost place to look for any of these ways to track your attendance beyond pen and paper. And I know that that's a question that's going to vary whether you're a large, organization with a big IT budget versus a smaller organization, but there are tools that have become available that make that easier to come by than years ago. So I hope that's helpful. And again, if I find anything, I'll be sure to send to VEX to distribute across. But thanks everybody for your interest in this topic. I hope it was helpful. I hope I was able to answer some of these questions, and I hope everybody is staying safe and staying sane and happy, and have a great rest of your VEX conference.
Thank you so much, Brendan. And definitely check out his webinars because they are pretty fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right, I posted the next sessions in the chat.